Welcome back to Living in Mexico. I'm Ana Maria Salazar. Thank you so much for joining us. Once again, I want to remind you that we've been broadcasting this show since 2004. So yeah, it's 20 years. It's more than 20 years. So I really appreciate all of you who've been joining us throughout the years. And it's a place where you can try to understand what's going on in Mexico in English and in Spanish. And boy, a lot happened this week. That's why I appreciate today's guest. You know him well. He's been joining us throughout the years. Carlos Ramirez. He's from Integralia. Carlos, I don't know. There's about 4 or 5 headlines that I would like to hear if you could share your opinion with our audience. And I don't know where to start. Let's start with this Huachicol scandal. And Huachicol, in a sense, for many foreigners, is kind of a very interesting word, and you kind of have to explain what it means. But Huachicol means that you have, and this is my explanation, Carlos, and you're going to tell me if I'm wrong, but Huachicol is a word that they started to use when people would buy stolen gasoline. And usually it was stolen gasoline that you could find in corners, or organized crime somehow figure out a way to siphon off gasoline from the government sources. But then it's been used in very different ways, and now we have this concept that came up this week and was making headlines, which is huachicol fiscal. So welcome to the show. Let's start out with that. Let's try to describe to our audience, when they see this headlines, this word huachicol fiscal, what are we talking about? Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Ana Maria, for having me. Yes, this theme about huachicol for many years now has been causing Mexico a lot of headaches. Mm-hmm. And the reason, let us not forget, Mexico has a monopoly company that produces all the gasoline for the country, gasoline and diesel, right? So in the past 10 or 15 years, the robbery of gasoline and this diesel has been going up, right? And that has led to an industry of criminal organizations that have expanded their capacities through selling gasoline that it's basically being stolen from Pemex. So what is huachicol fiscal? Well, basically, it is a derivative of the first huachicol, which is the direct robbery. It is basically transporting gasoline to the US, gasoline that basically, usually it is stolen from Pemex, and that is basically argued to be legal and fiscally is being used as a way to evade taxes. Mm-hmm. So it is certainly a way that criminal organizations use the robbed gasoline and then transport it and translate it, move it to the US, and basically argue that this is legal product. So mm-hmm. It has been increasing in Mexico. Drug trafficking organizations have used this, let's say, new branch of business.
A business, yeah.
Yeah, and clearly what happened during the weekend and all the week has been, has shown the magnitude of the problem. President Lopez Obrador, basically during his 6-year tenure, said to Mexicans, we have already solved the problem. Okay? Huachicol is basically solved. But the reality is that President Claudia Sheinbaum has immediately been thrown into a problem in which clearly huachicol hasn't been solved. And moreover, it has become a US-Mexico hot issue, because now that the US is going against drug organizations, they are looking much more closely to this issue of selling gasoline that is basically illegal gasoline. So that is the story, what erupted during this week. And now with the Navy, Ana Maria, the Navy, which is a Mexican institution that usually was considered to be corruption-free, now involved in a very delicate, intricate corruption scandal. So that is the topic of this week.
You know, and if you look at the numbers, it is mind-boggling. I mean, they're talking about more than 170 billion pesos in basically a tax evasion scheme. Because
Yes.
I mean, I think it's important to understand what's the business behind huachicol fiscal is basically what you import from the United States when you import gasoline or petroleum. It's usually gasoline. You manipulate the customs classification of what you're importing.
Exactly.
You usually use shell companies that issue fake invoices, right? They comes to Mexico, and basically with this temporary import permits that they use, it's a way to disguise what the true nature of these products are, which so basically it shows that you're importing, I don't know, oil, you're importing something else.
Yeah.
And then there is this apparently money laundering scheme, obviously, in order to be able to, where do you put the money, right? But it's basically you are issuing fake invoices, so you pay little taxes. And that scheme itself is resulting in more than 170 billion pesos. It's just, some are talking about this being one of the second sources of income for organized crime. It still blows my mind when you think about it.
It is big. As you mentioned, it has to do with the customs and how Mexico. Remember, President Lopez Obrador, we had a customs system which was certainly not perfect. But Lopez Obrador decided to take out civil servants from the customs authority and basically give it to the militaries, to the Navy specifically, to become the new guardians of the custom system. The argument of Lopez Obrador was there was a lot of corruption in the customs. And now what we are seeing is that the customs system has remained corrupt as ever, but now with the Navy in charge. And through this system of avoiding taxes, through fake invoices, and through importing basically what they argue was gasoline, but certainly, what they argue was not gasoline, and in reality, it has to do a lot with gasoline.
Mm-hmm. Now, there is the other information that came out this week is that there is, it not only involves Navy personnel, which is, it's not any person or a regular person. I mean, these are people, at least two of them, if not more, are related to the former Secretary of the Navy under President Manuel Lopez Obrador. And there appears to be, of all these like 555 shell companies that have been identified doing this, importing oil, gasoline and they're also talking about 8 ports. I mean, 8 ports. I mean, the more you try to understand the scheme, the more you realize there has to be very high level involvement to have potentially hundreds of people involved in this. You know what I mean? I mean, it's just, you can't have Navy personnel. You obviously it's not someone who's just doing this on his own accord. I mean, everyone in the Navy has a boss, has a commander. above them, below, they have people below them. I mean, the number of people in each one of these ports that were seeing these ships coming in, they had to know something was not right. I mean,
Yes.
I'm just trying to imagine how high up this went. And two, how many people were involved? 555 shell companies? What the heck?
Well, that is the big question, right? The network is big, as you mentioned, and with relatives of the former Minister of Navy or
Secretary
the
Secretary
Secretary of
of the
Navy.
Navy, yeah.
The question here is he involved or not? Remember that this event happens days after Secretary of State of the US, Marco Rubio, was here in Mexico. So it seems to me that it was not something casual that this happened exactly when he left. It has to do with this new or apparently good collaboration on security matters between two countries. But the point is, Lopez Obrador for 6 years basically said the problem is solved. The Navy is incorruptible.
Right.
We have solved the issue. It is clear that it is not.
No.
And the big question for Claudia Sheinbaum is, how far is she willing to go to tackle this problem? And who can, is she willing to go after the big names, the apparently big names that could be behind this big scheme?
And they're even talking about, and that's the problem, even trying to analyze this issue as how far up it goes, is they're even talking about, the sons of former President Manuel Lopez Obrador. I mean, there's nothing, I've been looking to see if there's something clear that would allow us to make that statement. It isn't, but it's just kind of every time you have these big scandals popping up in the last 6 months, there just seems to be somehow it takes you closer to either people who are close to President Manuel Lopez Obrador, friends or business people, or people who may be or relatives. I mean, they're talking about Romo, Alfonso Romo, who heads one of these banks that have already been threatened with sanctions by the U.S. government, having allowed the money laundering that it involves, or it was that financial institution where the money laundering was taking place. So, and Alfonso Romo was the President Manuel Lopez Obrador advisor. So, I don't know. I guess the question mark is, one, how high up is she willing to go, and whether she's going to be able to talk about something else, And the other issue this week that we absolutely need to talk about is the imposition of taxes on Chinese goods. Boy, the Chinese government seems to be really angry with the Mexican government.
Yeah. So yes, and let us not forget, I'm sorry, on the past theme, that there's also the name of Adán Augusto Lopez, who, as everyone knows, it was also a very close ally to Lopez Obrador, the former interior minister. He's also been involved in recent scandals. So anyway, moving on to China. This was a big decision by the Mexican government, by Claudia Sheinbaum. It is basically imposing tariffs to Chinese products on every single good that is imported by Mexico. Let us remind the audience that Mexico has a trade deficit with China of 120 billion US dollars. So China is our second trade partner in importance, right? So what Sheinbaum did with this decision, which was, I would call it the most audacious decision in trade in Mexico's past 40 years. We haven't seen something as this big in terms of imposing tariffs to any country in 40, 50 years. So it is big. And obviously, China is not happy because Mexico is unilaterally imposing tariffs on 1,400 items. And very importantly, on cars, 50% tariff on cars. Cars from China to Mexico have basically grown in the past years in an exponentially way. And now Mexico reacts to that, imposing tariffs. Exactly the same way the US is using tariffs to basically try to tackle trade imbalances. So now, okay, this decision is clearly aligned to the US. It is a way to convey to the US that Mexico is absolutely committed to North America, to the USMCA. So clearly, it is a decision to try to gain, I mean, negotiation power with the US, but it is not cost-free. It is gonna be very difficult to deal with the Chinese that are very angry with this decision.
I don't know if anybody has done a good analysis as to how this is going to impact the Mexican economy. I mean,
Yeah.
I cannot imagine once these tariffs kick in that this is not going to have an impact
Absolutely.
on people's ability to buy goods or
Yeah.
find goods,
Yeah.
and kind of even push more in economic crisis that we've somewhat been expecting just based on decisions being made by the United States. I mean, this could potentially affect, for example, inflation. It could affect people's ability to find, cheap goods that they
Yeah.
have been so accustomed to and have been favored, that has benefited a big portion of the population that have been receiving these grants by the government. So I don't. Do you have any sense how this could affect has anybody talked about this?
No, actually, I would say that uh, for my surprise, the media has had a very muted reaction. The business community has basically said nothing about this decision. But as you are mentioning, clearly it's going to have costs, and some of the costs are very clear. For many companies, the imports coming from China are a very significant and important source of their inputs into their production process. So obviously, having inputs with a higher cost is going to lead to higher costs overall. How will companies react to this? Either they will translate it into higher prices for consumers, or they will eat it through margins. Exactly the same decision that companies have to do now in the US.
Right.
And moreover, I think, as you mentioned, that it's going to have an inflation impact, probably not a big one, because, I mean, imports from China are 130 billion, but Mexico still imports much more from other countries, from the US particularly. So, but it will have an impact. Definitely. Bank of Mexico will look at this very thoroughly to understand how much could this impact the overall inflation picture for the next coming months. But it is a big decision, Ana Maria, and the Mexican government is obviously, as always, trying to minimize it and saying, okay, we're going to be fine with China. No, no, no. It is going to be a big fight in the next coming months.
Oh my gosh. One last issue that came up this week, and I mean, it's hard to do a definite analysis as to how this all is going to work out, but we finally are seeing some aspects of how the new justice reform is going to work out. It's now being implemented. We saw the Supreme Court justices finally meet this week, and there's just mixed. I mean, it's hard to imagine this not the reform not being very disruptive. I mean, there was a very interesting interview with one of the ministers, one of the justices, and she was complaining that they are reducing not only their salary, but their benefits, including, health insurance. So they're going to have to basically either get their own health insurance, or they're going to have to go to the IMSS, which we saw, or the
It's
ISTE, which
Yes.
we have seen that doesn't, I mean, just watching this horrendous accident that took place in Mexico City this week, where a tank blew up, and you have, 70 people have been burned, and I think there's more than 10 people who have now died from it. I mean, the hospitals are just not prepared. They just don't have the resources. So I don't know. What's your initial take?
What we saw this week on the first, let's say, um, practice of the new Supreme Court, right?
Mhm.
The new through 9 ministers deciding on their first issues is basically a Supreme Court in which you can see that there are some ministers that have some experience and that are more, let's say, um, I mean, they are operating, or they are working with the old rules, but you see the new guys coming in, and a lot of inexperience, a lot of clearly people within this 9 guys that have no clue on how the Supreme Court
Yeah,
operates.
yeah.
And so basically, Ana Maria, it's going to be a long learning curve and
Mm.
a Supreme Court that is going to be enormously politicized. You can see it from today. And this is going to, obviously, as they start to take decisions, it's going to become more clearly. But what we saw this week is a Supreme Court, unfortunately for Mexico, very, very unexperienced, and I mean, with a guide of trying to look good for the people, right? With this,
Right. Yeah. I mean, their theme is, we are the justices for the people,
yeah,
which is fine. And you can argue that there was problems with the system, the
yeah,
judicial system in general. There has been corruption. You can also say that there's not enough resources at the time. You can say that it was ineffective. But you could argue whether it was the law or were the judges ineffective. I don't know. But what we do know is that at least there was some sense that those who were justices, and those who were ministers and judges, had magistrates and judges, they had some experience. Not all of them, especially the most recent decisions made by, and the people, one or two people, Andres Manuel Lopez Obrador appointed to the Supreme Court, but they had at least more than 10 years of experience. Some of them had, by the time they became justices, had 25, 30 years
absolutely.
of experience. Now, the entire judicial system is just, it's basically a group of, we assume all of them are lawyers. I mean, I think there's some questions mark that maybe some of them are not lawyers. But, most of them are lawyers, and most of them don't have, or have very little experience, in the justice system. So, I mean, what can go wrong? And then apparently they're not going to give them the resources they need, which is another issue we didn't talk about, because we can, I mean, we saw the draft budget that the president is presenting to Congress. I mean, apparently there's been a cut in the resources at a time
Yeah,
when they most probably need resources, at
yeah,
least to get these people trained. You know what I mean?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So without resources, because they're talking about cutting 15 billion pesos to the judicial branch, with this very inexperienced new judicial branch, basically coming out of nowhere, many of
Mhm.
these people, um, it's not looking good. And moreover, most of them, again, they are where they are because they are close to the to power, to the system,
To the to
to the
Morena, the
to the
party.
party.
Yeah.
So their decision-making process is going to be clearly politicized. And yeah, we will see that as time goes by, but it's going to be a long learning curve and very politicized judicial branch coming into the next coming months and years.
And there's going to be elections because apparently only one half of the
Yes.
judges were elected. So there's going to be elections again in 2027. Is that correct? Or is it next year?
2027, more than 400 federal judges will be elected. And again, it's going to be a big problem for the National Electoral Institute to organize that election. But yes, you're right. Half of the federal judges are still in their posts, the original judges, but they will leave their post in 2027 and will be elected.
You know, it just listening to you, I acabo de caer en cuenta, like that they would say, so we have midterm elections and the elections of the second half of these 400 other judges in 2026, all at the same time?
Absolutely.
You got that's impossible. I mean, Carlos, think about it. I mean, can you imagine? I mean, the size of the ballots. I mean, how many ballots are we going to have if we're going to be voting?
To be clear, Ana Maria, it will be impossible for the National Electoral Institute to organize a dual election on the midterm election and then the judicial election. Actually, the National Electoral Institute, you know that the president is quite close to the government, Guadalupe Tadei, and she has
from Sonora,
asked,
by the way. Yeah.
She asked formally a couple weeks ago to postpone the judicial election because it's going to be impossible for them to organize it. But well, anyway, that's still 2 years from now. But anyway, it is not looking good. As we expected, this reform is going to lead to a lot of issues and problems for Mexico.
One last question, and this is a very 30-second answer. When do you think we're going to start feeling the impact of the trade wars in Mexico on the Mexican economy? I mean, are we feeling it now? Not really, right?
Mexican export base has been very resilient. Very resilient. Exports to the US with data till July, Mexico exports have increased more than 6%.
Wow.
Just to give you an idea, China's exports to the US have fallen 20%. Canada exports to the US have fallen 4%. And Mexico has grown 6%. So until now, Ana Maria, to be clear and to be honest, this big noise about tariffs have not led to a major disruption in Mexico trade relation with the US. It has a lot to do with the USMCA protection that grants basically 80% of Mexico goods free access to the US market without a tariff. That has basically shielded the Mexico export base and has led to a relatively low impact to basically the overall system. Now, is it creating a problem? Yes, it is, because some sectors are being clearly impacted. The automobile, the iron sector, the aluminum, steel, and there's consequences. This is not obviously not cost-free, but if you look at the overall data, it hasn't been as bad as expected.
Wow. Carlos, I've taken so much of your time. I really appreciate you joining us this week on Living in Mexico. And we broached so many issues, all of them very important. So I really appreciate you joining us. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ana Maria, for having me.
Carlos Ramirez from Integralia. I always enjoy talking to him. We're going to go to commercial break. I'm Ana Maria Salazar, and you're listening and watching Living in Mexico. Don't go away. I'll be right back.